Okay, hi everyone. My name is Jeff Kaplan. At CARTO, I'm Director of Customer Success, which hopefully some of the folks in this room may have some interaction with our team. We handle a lot of enterprise customers all around the world. But today, we have the very good fortune to be able to have a panel format conversation here. We have what's been called as a random selection, but it's actually diversity. It's diversity of experiences. And what we wanted to do is take about 30 minutes, I think we've got officially, to have the chance in a conversation to share experiences about, you might think of it as the agony and the ecstasy of introducing location intelligence to your organization or your company. And so I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves in just one second, but just to say that the goal of what we're trying to do in this conversation is to kind of reveal different kinds of experiences that different organizations in very different industries have in bringing data and geospatial data into their business, into the mission of their organization. So that's kind of the larger objective here. It's really kind of experience sharing. We are going to try, although it's a fairly short session, to have some Q&A time. So we want to have the chance for you to either ask questions or even share something that sort of relates to the conversation we're having. So without any further delay, what I want to do is I want to ask the three remarkable panelists that we've got joining us to just really quickly just sort of introduce yourself, your name, the organization, and maybe just a second about the role that you play so people can sort of understand the context of what we'll be able to talk about together. So Françoise, if you'd kick us off, that would be great.
Sure. So my name is Françoise Picard. I work for the New York City Health Department, so I'm in the public sector. And a lot of my work, I'm the Director of Risk and Analytics for Emergency Response at the Health Department, which means that a lot of my job is figuring out how we better analyze data to support decision making, especially when we have to respond to a time-sensitive issue.
Hello everyone, I'm Anna Sofia and I've been at Waze for 3 years now. I'm the Global Insights Lead. And I create insight stories for our advertisers and partners that work with us using Waze's unique data.
Cool. Great to meet everybody this morning. My name is Kerry Leggio. I'm the Global Topic Lead for BCG. That's the Boston Consulting Group, one of the largest management consulting groups around the world. I help lead an amazing team of 30 folks globally to help provide that location analytics arm to our case team. So our case teams are our consultants that are on the ground with our clients and making sure we're bringing the best analytics to bear for our clients. Yeah.
Great. So public sector and two very different businesses as well. So the first thing that I wanted to do is, and this is to ask each of the people on the panel, is I want to pick up on something that our CEO, Javi, had said in his opening. And you know, the picture of what's happened in this neighborhood in Brooklyn sort of brings it to mind, which is what's changed, you know, in recent times. And what I mean to say is, you know, geospatial data, analytics, data generally, you know, is having enormous impacts on different organizations. And I'm just curious from each of your perspectives, because you sit in very different places, if you think about what has changed dramatically in terms of your organization and where geo and data fit into it, I think that would be an interesting place to start. Sort of like you're the neighborhood that Javi started by talking about. How has each of your neighborhoods changed? And maybe we could, well, let's work backwards. Kerry, why don't you go ahead and go first?
I feel like we could spend a half hour here because this is probably one of the biggest topics of what things have changed. I've been at BCG for about 7 years. And in 7 years, things have changed dramatically. So we came and we had an idea to start this geoanalytics group within BCG. There's like 4 of us in this back unoccupied office, just calling anybody we could and say, I think you need a map, I think you need a map, I think you need some location analytics. And people didn't know what location analytics was, really, even how to employ it. So what we often would do is just say, okay, give us your data, we'll show it on a map, and we'll go from there. And I think I look back on now, and what we do now is that we actually have a team, and we actually embed with our data scientists now to make sure we're bringing the best analytics to bear for our clients. So what we're delivering now is not just a map. It's actually kind of real new insights that our clients actually wouldn't be able to get without location intelligence and data science. And the integration of those two, I think, is really the power of what we're seeing for our organization.
Yeah.
Please, Sophia, go ahead.
Yeah, from our point It's interesting to think about maps as something that has evolved from a piece of paper, something that was static, to now something that you can actually access through your phones and that is real time and alive. And Waze has pioneered that in the sense that we created the first map that uses real-time crowdsourced information from actual humans that are verifying that what's happening around you is accurate and happening right now in real time. And it's interesting to think about how over time Waze as a company, we've been able to use the data that we've been collecting in such a great way. And there are remarkable examples that Waze works with partners where we help cities and municipalities actually improve the life of people in the communities. A very good example was with the city of Oakland, where we actually gave them access to the real-time accident information that our users were reporting on Waze when accidents were happening. And they were able to send their response teams immediately to the accident locations. And we were able to look at the data and see that 70% of the accidents on Waze were actually reported 2 minutes faster than the first 911 call. And they were able to save, on average, 4 minutes in response time to bring ambulances to the accident location. And this is an amazing way that we've been using location data to actually improve the life of people.
Let me just pause for a second. You know, Waze is interesting because the external changes that it's sort of enabled have been kind of obvious to lots of people. I mean, I use it when I drive around too. It's changed how I drive, literally.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you look inside Waze, do you see change? I mean, you know, the change that Waze has brought is very obvious externally to lots of people, millions of people. Do you see anything internally that's changed in the time you've been there? Like just the company itself, how it operates inside? I'm just curious, because that wouldn't be visible to everybody else.
No, absolutely. We have been evolving a lot in the way we work with geospatial data inside for our teams and the tools that we're using. We understand how important it is to be able to visualize and to actually get the insight out of the visualizations. And we are really focused internally in trying to be smarter and more efficient in the way we're using the geospatial data.
Has it changed the culture of the company at all, would you say? Or, I mean, the company's kind of built on location anyway,
Yeah,
but...
exactly. It's in our DNA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Francoise,
Well,
what's different today than it used to be?
What's obvious is the tools have changed and the expectations have changed. For us, you know, both with the leadership in the city and with the people of New York. And so I think, you know, our mission has stayed the same, but one of the things that this sort of acceleration that's fantastic in technology has done has also put us sort of in a new world where we have to rethink sort of how we provide services to the city or how we understand the city. And I mean, I will just say, like, the health department here has been using data for 200 years. That's nothing new, you know, and we've got a whole history of static maps. So a lot of, you know, what we're really struggling with now is how do we maintain the public's trust and how do we sort of revamp our analytic process and our decision-making process to take advantage of what's changed in technology without losing sort of the best practices and, you know, all of the understanding and guidance that's led us to this point where, you know, we're well equipped to take care of the city of New York.
Are you, I mean, Department of Health, it has obviously a huge public-facing sort of mission to it. Have the expectations changed? I mean, is this, you know, in terms of what you're expected to be able to sort of help in decision-making with data, has that changed? Do you feel that as pressure?
I think we do, and I think, you know, it's always a back and forth. There's certainly a huge pressure, and I think everyone faces this who works in the data field. People think there's always more data than there is, or that the data is more reliable than it is. So we get lots of pressure, like, well, you're the health department. If Facebook knows all this about us, why don't you know this about us? And, you know, it's hard because, and I will say we take it very seriously, that public health doesn't work without the public's trust. So we're very careful when we collect data. We have IRBs, we have all of these different things, and we do studies over like 30 years. So if we change how we analyze data, that has implications for like how we make decisions across the city. That being said, I mean, we also sort of want to get better at doing it, but we're sort of in this difficult period right now of trying to understand what data can we trust and understanding the biases in the data. You know, there's lots of fun new open data out there, but one of the things we know is that, you know, there's bias across every data collection platform, and what we don't want to do is institutionalize, you know, sort of bad data practices that might make us focus on one neighborhood because they're more connected in using Waze over another neighborhood that isn't. Mm-hmm. And again, that doesn't mean we throw out Waze data, because we do use it. But that's sort of the big challenge we wrestle with right now, because we have to represent everyone in the city of New York. So.
You know, you mentioned the word trust, and when I had the opportunity to moderate this panel in our event in Madrid, that issue came up as well. And so I want to kind of, unlike I did last time, I want to ask explicitly about this question. And the question is this, which is, do the people that either you serve inside your organization or company or externally, like in the case of BCG where you've got external clients, you know, do they trust the data enough to make a decision? What's your sense of that? I'm just, since you brought it up, I'm just curious, like, whether it's internal sort of stakeholders or, in your case, the public. I mean, do they trust the data? Do they trust the analytics that is being done with it?
Yes.
Enough to act on it?
It's an evolving issue. I think they trust some of it, but you know, one of the challenges we have that we're sort of confronting is that having more interactive tools and the ability to analyze faster has sort of changed our mindset, because I like to joke that at the health department we're really good at creating artifacts. We create maps of the city that was, because that's sort of traditionally what we do. We collect data, then we say, well, this happened. Here's the trend over time. And one of the things we're trying to get better at is understanding the city that is and the city that might be. And I think, you know, some people come on full board. I just honestly want to say I don't think there are any really good guidelines for how we do that. So one of the things that we find is we're sort of developing new analytic pathways and new best practices as we go. And that's terrifying, because you can say, well, we got a room of experts and ethicists together and they felt this was okay. And then they're like, well, what does CDC think? And it's like, well, CDC hasn't addressed this problem yet. So it's part of the fear of being in a new territory. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, you did. Let me skip over, Sophia. I'll come back to you for a second. I have another question for you that I want to come back to specifically with Waze. Carrie, trust. I mean, you have 10,000 consultants in BCG who then serve an even larger universe of clients of all manner.
Yeah, I think BCG is a very data-driven company from the start. It always has been very analytical. So I would say that our client base, which is oftentimes our consultants that are working with our clients directly, have a very healthy skepticism for data. And I think it's a good thing, right? So they're not going to
even though they're data-oriented.
Even though, no, and I think that's the point, is because actually I think they understand data, the limitations of data, and actually understand there's assumptions that go into all the data and the process, especially process data, that went into that. And I think laying those foundational guidelines out, or making sure that they're clearly stated, all the assumptions that went into the analysis, all the assumptions that went into the data collection is actually critical. And I think that's, being at BCG is actually one place where I've actually felt the pressure to do that more, because oftentimes we're enabling our consultants. Our consultants are then side by side with their client team. The client team are asking those questions. So our consultants need to understand what's being presented, what they're presenting in front of their clients. So it's ultimately their responsibility to understand the data. So we have to make sure that we have clear guidelines of what the assumptions were, what the analysis was. Otherwise, you lose any sort of credibility, trust within your organization.
Yeah, and I can add a point that sitting on the analytics team, that's our role, to simplify the data and make sure we give to our teams the insights and enable them to make the right interpretation of the data.
I want to ask a sort of similarly open-ended question for a second, which is, you know, I sort of asked you in the beginning to talk about sort of like what's changed. One of the things I think is interesting is when you look then not only what's changed, but where there hasn't been impact. Like where there hasn't been impact, but especially the sort of negative space. In other words, the question is, when you think about your roles, or the team you have, the organization you're within, has there been less impact in places that you expected to see sort of geospatial and data and analytics have a much more and larger impact, either internally or externally. You know, has there been any sort of surprises in the sort of where it hasn't sort of landed with impact yet? Françoise, what do you think?
Yeah, I think something that always surprised me is when we do work for preparedness, and I'll just use like when we create CARTO maps and I'll give them to people. What I'm surprised that hasn't taken off is using the maps more for just casual decision making. And I mean, just, you know, like the day to day, like, so when you think about, and forgive me, but we all use Excel, right? Whether we want to or not. And, you know, most organizations, you have a few sort of basic Excel sheets that you just go to 1,000 times because it's just a couple columns, you're always just double checking, let me just pivot this. And, you know, a lot of decision makers, they're really accustomed to using Excel to get a quick 5-second analysis. And I think, like, one of the cultural things I haven't been able to better move us forward on is thinking of maps in the same way. Like, I want people to think of our maps as a working map, that so when you have a question, you know, you just quickly go and apply a filter or a layer and just say, okay, let me answer that question quickly. Instead, there's still sort of this notion that maps are a finished product. So like, okay, I want a map, and now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna come up with a whole project proposal, and then I'm gonna ask you, and I'm gonna expect you to give me something in a month. And so that's like, I'll send people links like right after a meeting because it took 5 seconds. And then they won't click that link until a month later when they want the finished product. And I would have rather they clicked through and we had a back and forth.
And is that like they just have a different expectation about like what a map is and how they're going to use it? Or is that it's a new tool and they don't want to take the time or to sort of figure out how to use it if it takes that? I mean, or what's the blocker there?
I think it's the institutional culture. I mean, these are all people who I firmly believe use Google Maps to get home. Like, you know, they know how to use maps on their phone.
Or Waze, as the
or
case may
Waze,
be.
I apologize. Sorry. But yeah, I think it's just when they are in the work mode and they think, well, here's how I use a map. And again, I think we think too much in artifact land. And so I think getting them to think of a map as just sort of a working document that they use as they make decisions and as they go along is something that hasn't taken off.
Sophia?
So Waze being a map at its core, geospatial data is integral to us. So it's something that is part of our culture and part of our DNA, as I said, and it touches all the areas of our business, the clients that we work with, the partners that we work with. So I feel like it touches everywhere we were working. There, obviously, internally, there's areas that we can always become better at using data more faster and efficient, and enabling more people to use this data in a smarter way.
From your team's point of view, is there like a next thing? I mean, like you know, not to sort of reveal secrets, but I mean, you know, when you think about sort of what's the next thing then? I mean, you know, obviously Waze by definition is, you know, it's a geospatially oriented entity from design, from the very beginning. So what's the next thing?
We think a lot about the clients that we work with. So for you that I don't know if everyone is familiarized with Waze or uses Waze, but if you use Waze, you might see a pin of Dunkin' Donuts or Whole Foods. So those advertisers, they are putting pins on a map so they allow users to see where their stores are.
Right.
And we think a lot about improving the way we give them information about the performance of their campaigns and maybe use more maps in that sense.
So, I mean, that's not about the drivers, that's about the people who are advertising as well.
That's about our business side, yes. Yep.
Carrie, what do you think in terms of like where it's not yet sort of landed with the impact you might anticipate?
Yeah, I know it's a good question, and it's a tough one. I think I want to answer in two ways. I mean, you know, BCG is a PowerPoint culture. We live and breathe in PowerPoint, right? So, and that we struggle with, right? So we're like, okay, guys, let's start. You know, yes, you can take a screenshot of that CARTO account, yes, but wouldn't it be better if we were actually taking this live with, you know, and actually having a conversation live with the maps, the analytics, all of the different pieces, whether it's CARTO or other platforms. I think that's one, you know, kind of shift that we're trying to push, and we're seeing traction. And I think there's definitely some early adopters that are trying that out and really finding great experience with that. The other piece is it's all driven. We talked about data and data quality a lot. in the earlier keynotes. And that's key. You know, it's key to what we do. It's key to our analysis we do. We can have client data. We can actually look at that on a map. Ultimately, without the context and the other geographic data to layer that in, there's not as much insight as you can drive on that. So what we're trying to, where the gap is for us is Asia Pacific, Africa, some of these regions where it is a little bit data poor right now. There's a huge opportunity to expand and develop really new insights that haven't been done there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. We talked about AI, you know, and you know, recognition of you know, footprints and you know, it could be rooftops, it could be businesses. There's a lot of opportunity, and that's where we have a huge gap right now on actually providing the level of insights we want to. We are doing work, and we're doing some level insights, but the level insights that we think we need to get to for our clients to make better decisions is really, there's a huge data gap, I would say, in some of the regions in Asia Pacific and Africa.
Right, so not to a data desert. I mean, there's just not the availability of the data that would enable more sort of impactful decision making.
Yeah, we talked about the you know, kind of the mobility data that was earlier, and I think that's actually going to be a big game changer on how we can look at insights and how people are moving throughout the network. Obviously, with the importance of, you know, data privacy as well.
I have some more questions, but I'm kind of mindful that we'd like to sort of open this up a little bit. So even sort of more in advance of what I was intending, I want to take a pause in the questions I've got sort of teed up and see if there's anybody that would like to sort of make a comment, ask a question. I'm sort of inviting anybody to sort of join into the conversation if you'd like. I don't know if we have a mic, but there we go. We do. Vanessa's. There we go. Hold on a second. I mean, the echo in here is pretty good if you yell, but can avoid it.
Hi, thanks. I wanted to see if you guys could address kind of more practical budget issues that you've had, especially, I know, like in consulting, being billable, it's a big thing. How do you justify money and time being spent on certain geospatial projects, especially to those, you know, who aren't familiar with it?
It's a great question. You know, for us, I think what we often will do is we'll invest some time during the year. So we kind of look at the whole year as a plan, and we know we need to get to a certain level of billability to be profitable. But we also want to make sure, for two reasons. We want to actually make sure we have research and development time and key opportunities for developing and marketing material and actually kind of highlighting what we do. We don't focus on those two things. I think we'll probably die in a couple of years, right? So we have to make sure that we invest a good amount of time to research and development and actually business development, which oftentimes is our market material, interactive maps, and getting the message out there. And I think for us, we've been very, I think what we said, one of the challenges is actually growing and growing at a pace that is actually sustainable and meets the needs of our client base, because what we've only seen is actually great impact that we're able to drive, but also extreme level interest in what we're able to do, which is great, and I love that. But also the flip side of that is then you have all this demand you can't meet, and then how do you balance that level of demand and still find the time for the research and development and the business development that's important? And so we do carve out time, oftentimes in between projects, that we say, okay, give you a space, and then our analysts really like that time because they actually can get a debrief and actually start to think creatively about different projects as well.
Sophia, what about at Waze? Like, how do you defend the budget, or how do you grow the budget for you?
So within my team, we try to first start small and prove the value of these maps. And with some examples, collect the feedback from the clients, the partners that we work with, and prove in our team that this is really valuable and will bring us more business and help our partners grow as well. If we can help them make strategic decisions by looking at valuable insights through maps, we are also helping our business growing. So that's how we try to do. We try to do a lot of proof concept, and we do use case studies, and then we push it within our organization to have more investment in maps.
Francoise, I know in public sector this is going to be could be a very different kind of answer, but because budgeting is always notoriously hard.
It is, but I have to say, I'm just going to say it, Esri has made my life easy in that regard. Because really, especially in government and in emergency management, there's always been this need for maps. Like, no one questions that, but there's been this sort of legacy of notoriously expensive GIS projects that become these siloed portals that never quite work. You have to hire people, they have to have 6 months to learn it, and then that's the only person who knows how to do it, and then they quit, and then you have to hire another person, and they're like, well, obviously we need to hire another GIS person, and then you need a PhD in GIS, and then you have 50 other brilliant analysts who apparently can't put 5 dots on a map because they don't have a PhD in GIS. And sorry, I have some demons. So yeah, I mean, initially it was a massive political battle to try. I mean, I had a bigger issue not selling a cheaper, more agile tool, but getting it through procurement, like, because government procurement is notoriously favorable towards IT cartels that know how to work government procurement. So that's just the honesty. I mean, it took a while with CARTO. I mean, I always like to think I can beat that 18-month period that they say it takes a tool to take off. I never beat it. It took 18 months with Tableau. It took 18 months with CARTO. But then it gains, and one of the amazing things is when suddenly you have analysts who know how to make maps, and they feel so much more empowered, and their bosses are happy, and now, it's just become so much easier. And a little harder for the Esri folks, so I apologize.
You don't have to apologize like that here.
And one add-on there, I think that's a really good point that I want to mention. We're using CARTO to enable our consultants to do the work that they would oftentimes come to us for. So it also frees us up to do more impactful work, right? So we're able to enable them with CARTO because it's so easy to use that they can actually put dots on the map and they can get those initial location intelligence insights. And that's very helpful because it actually frees us up to do the bigger projects that we want to work on.
I mean, people often talk about, vendor lock-in, but what you're kind of describing in different ways is essentially expert lock-in. And I know, each of you and your teams represents that expertise, but on the other hand, your teams aren't going to scale to sort of the size of the ultimate universe you live in, whether it's clients, whether it's the city, or whether it's the entire world of Waze users. I mean, those are big universes, and no expert team's itself going to scale, and breaking expert lock-in has a certain value. You're all shaking your head, so I think you agree. I know we're running short of time. Other questions? Because I'd like to sort of enable, please, some more people to join in.
Thank you. My question's for Anna, for the Waze. So you talked about part of your business putting the pins for, the new other companies like McDonald's or something like that, hopefully. How do you navigate making sure that, because one of the valuable things of Waze is that you have all that user data, it not interfering with that valuable locational data that your users are producing, while also putting these pins to not make sure your users you're changing how their behavior, because Waze is already changing that. What things do you have in place to be able to make sure that your data stays valuable?
So we work with the advertisers and clients that are actually able to provide the value by putting their locations on a map. We are not trying to change the behavior or the commute of the user in their everyday life. We are providing them value by letting them know that there's this business location in this spot. Does that answer your question?
The question is, even just showing the location of those businesses, is that actually itself changing how I use Waze when I drive around?
We are enabling them to talk with potential consumers, just as you would see on your phone, in a banner, in a website, or in the TV.
And do you have anything in place that would potentially, something where...
I think it's not my area of expertise, so...
Gotcha.
I mean, as a user of Waze, one of the obvious things is you vote with your feet, so to speak. If I see a location of something on my way somewhere, I choose to stop or not stop. I'm made aware of it, but I still make the choice.
Exactly.
Anyway, let's see if we can squeeze in one more question. All right, I'm going to be biased. I'm calling someone I know.
Yeah, I wanted to know what are the biggest barriers, either political, organizational, for getting data for your analysis from other departments into your work? What do you find is the most, obstacles to getting
Biggest
data,
blockers.
the right data? Yeah.
Why don't we go down the line? Francoise, go ahead.
I mean, data's all about relationships. So I don't view it more, I mean, data is the most political thing in the city of New York. I will fully stand by that. I have the most political job. So the best part of my time is spent just building relationships with analysts, getting people to trust me. You know, the technical stuff can all be worked out.
Yeah. I can say on our side, a lot of it is data infrastructure. Different companies work in different ways, and sometimes it's really hard just to connect those data sets, and the infrastructure is a huge challenge for us.
Yeah, I'd say for us, a lot of the challenge is actually getting the data from the clients, right? So that's actually the critical step, and that takes a lot of time, and that's all about relationships. And so actually maybe making sure we enable our key relationship holders in that conversation. It's not just some random person coming in and saying, I need your data. It's actually making sure that from our side that we have key relationship stakeholders front and center during that data conversation as well.
That's great. Great questions. Thank you very much. I want to say because we're out of time, I want to say thank you very much to our incredible panelists, Francoise, Sophia, Carrie. Thanks to all of you for joining us.